morning, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are, YouTube. So it's the final race of the season, so obviously you got the caravan on and we're heading out to Santa Pod. So I thought I'd do a little update video and just cover something that isn't readily covered on particularly many caravan channels on YouTube. And there are a few that have covered it very well, but I thought I'd give my little take on it. When people first buy a caravan, are often concerned about it being harmful to their vehicle, putting the car under undue strain and things like that. And that's a perfectly reasonable assumption and a perfectly reasonable fear. But there are a few driving practices which will really help, and also a little bit of a technical reason why at certainly this point in time, if you're towing regularly, especially if it's quite heavy, you are better off with a diesel engine. So the first things first, strain on the vehicle. We are obviously towing something that's much heavier than the standard load for a car, and that is going to have an effect on performance. But it's not wise to simply give it full throttle, full revs and get up to speed at your normal rate. You need to understand you're going to react much slower in acceleration and in braking. You need to look further down the road. You've got to remember your speed limits are different. This single carriageway here is 50 miles an hour instead of 60. And it's worth remembering that while the extra weight takes longer to get moving, it takes comparatively small increase in power to keep rolling. So rather than just hammering full throttle and full revs and screaming the car, use the torque characteristics of your engine to propel you at a reasonable speed. Now, in a diesel, you're going to find peak torque somewhere between 2,000 or 3,000 RPM. So it really is not a lot of benefit in running it to a 4,500 RPM red line. It's not going to gain you much acceleration. You're just revving harder, wasting fuel, and driving like a complete idiot like this Freelander was for no apparent reason. And so idiots aside, you get the odd ones. He's now going for the overtake on the car in front, even though he blatantly doesn't have the space. He is driving like a complete knob jockey. But yeah, so decent acceleration within the torque curve of your engine won't overload the vehicle. It's producing its most efficient power, and equally is still going to give you reasonable acceleration. So as a perfect example, I'm using about half throttle on this Volvo. We've got a very well matched combination. So the caravan I'm towing loaded is barely 1,000 kilos, and the car has a 1,500 kilo rating. So that is a very good example of a well-matched combination. And here we are, as I'm accelerating off this roundabout. I'm leaving the roundabout at 30 miles an hour. I'm accelerating now, and obviously I'm on automatic. The car's shifting at 2,700, and I'm already now at 50 miles an hour. So I'm not working the car hard, I'm not working the gearbox hard, and I'm not holding anyone up. As you can see, that 30 to 50 only took a matter of seconds, and probably was only very slightly slower than I would have been solo. And I've still sat behind the same car I was in the same position I was. In fact, that 4x4 that just came past us like a lunatic is still where he was. He hasn't gained a single thing. So don't let people around you concern you. If you are going slower than you'd like to, do pull in. I know people say, oh, the caravan club will ever do. The reality is they don't. That's just simply not what happens. But read your roundabout further, look for gaps in the traffic and calculate how fast you're going to be needing to go when you get there. Don't just slow right down or speed right up, because you're trying to conserve momentum. So this brings us on to the second point, which is power. Now, horsepower is kind of a made up thing. It doesn't really exist in a way. Torque is a very real meaning. Now, horsepower is simply an amount of work done over time. And it was viewed as a good horse could pull, I think the numbers were 33,000 pounds over 1 mile, or 1 foot, or 1 pound over 33,000 feet, something like that. I forget the exact numbers. So it's a fairly arbitrary unit. And torque is an actual measurement. It's an amount of force generated. So when you're accelerating, you need that twisting motion of the crankshaft, that leverage, to pull the transmission round. And that's what torque is. So good torque at a reasonable RPM is going to give you a good towing experience. Power is simply torque over revs. So if you have half the torque and double the revs, you have the same power. So As they say in a lot of car circles, it's not the peak on the graph that matters, it's the area underneath it. So you've got lots of torque in the middle of your power band, the car's going to have an easier time towing than a more powerful car that has a narrow peak higher up. So you've got to look at how your power is spread, and that gives you an idea of how you're going. But yeah, at this point in time, the characteristics of diesel engines are more suited to towing than petrol. Obviously there is the emissions consideration with diesel, but equally, because of the way the power is made, the economy doesn't drop off as much with a diesel as it does with a petrol. Now, if I wasn't towing, or if fuel consumption was no issue, I would still go with a more powerful petrol, because they are nicer to drive, there is no two ways about it. But there are some very, very, very good diesels, and if you're in the market for a tow car in the £3,000 to £5,000 range to tow a caravan of 1,200 kilos, you can do a lot worse than something like this V50. The 2-litre diesel is more than up to the task. The other thing to consider is actually pulling away. Now, caravan brakes are what are called override brakes, and that means when you brake, the coupling compresses, and that sort of puts the brakes, and the caravan tries to overrun the car and applies its own brakes. What that means, when you come to a standstill, the coupling is compressed. When you pull away, it's better for the coupling and the caravan and the car and everything, rather than just pulling away normally. You'll get a big clonk if you do that. Just let the car roll away if at all possible, or pull away gently. You should have either just a very minor clonk or no clonk at all. As the coupling wears, as the caravan gets older, that will increase as well. That play and that movement will increase. But it just gives you a more gentle pull away scenario, and just cuts down the shock and everything, including your transmission. So yeah, there you go. Just a few simple things to consider when you're towing, and that will give your vehicle a much easier time and prevent premature failures of clutches, dual mass flywheels, automatic gearboxes. It will keep everything running cooler, and when carefully and considerately towed, towing a caravan should put very little extra wear and extra stress on your vehicle and shouldn't really be a factor. So there you go. If you like these videos, hit the like and subscribe button. In the meantime, we're going to head to Santapod, get our pits set up. We also have a nice double axle box trailer now as well, so we're moving up in the world, and we'll go and get racing and see what's going to happen this weekend. In the meantime, hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.